At 3 in the morning, on the 19th of May, 1916, 3 men walked into the mountains of South Georgia.
Ernest Shackleton, Frank Worsley, Tom Crean.
Nobody had ever crossed that island. There was no map. They went anyway.
36 hours later, they walked out the other side.
And every one of them had counted a 4th man.
So this is Frank Worsley's description up here while writing this 7 years after almost each step of that journey comes back clearly. Even now I find myself counting our party. Shackleton, Crean and I. And who was the other? Of course there were only 3, but it's strange that in mentally reviewing the crossing we should always think of a 4th and then correct ourselves.
That is Frank Worsley, writing 7 years later, still counting. None of them said a word about it at the time. Not for 36 hours.
Shackleton thought his own mind was coming apart, and he was the one they were following. And when it was over, and they were safe, and he finally sat down to write the book.
But when you come to accounts of the 3rd man, that's where he dries up. There's a sense in which Shackleton felt like he couldn't talk about this experience. There were certain things which never can be spoken of that were beyond mortal ken. And the other 2 men were the same. Tom Crean reportedly only ever talked about it once. And if you look at Worsley and Shackleton's accounts combined, they amount to about 8 to 10 lines across 2 books, okay?
8 lines from 3 men who had just done the impossible.
Here is what Shackleton did write, once, at the end of a chapter. It seemed to me often that we were 4, not 3. This is his voice. It was recorded in 1910 on a wax cylinder.
We reached a point within 97 geographical miles of the South Pole. The only thing that stopped us from reaching the actual point was the lack of 50 pounds of food.
That is a different expedition. He is talking about the food.
He never recorded one word about the 4th man. Not one, for the rest of his life.
It has happened to other people. It keeps happening to other people.
1933. Everest. Frank Smythe. Alone. Above 27,000 feet. No oxygen. No rope. And completely certain somebody was climbing beside him. He stopped to eat. He took out a bar of mint cake. He broke it in half, and he turned around to hand the other half to a man who was not there.
Behind him was 4,000 feet of mountain and nothing else.
The neuroscientist Olaf Blanke tells the same story about Reinhold Messner on Nanga Parbat.
So Reinhold Messner felled a 3rd climber, so him, his brother, and then there was the 3rd man, if you want, descending with us, keeping a regular distance, a little to my right, a few steps away from me, just outside my field of vision. So it's like whenever he looks, he couldn't see anybody, but as soon as he looked back forward, the person was there again. It's an on and off phenomenon, and especially in mountaineering, very often it's felt as a companion, a helpful companion who gives generally good advice what to do in situations of great danger.
A helpful companion. Remember that. It matters later. The 11th of September, 2001. The South Tower of the World Trade Center.
Ron DiFrancesco is lying face down on a stairwell floor above the impact zone, in the smoke, giving up.
At that point, I heard this voice, and someone called me and told me to come this way. And it was a forceful voice, so I got up and followed it right into the thickest of smoke and pushed in a last-ditch effort for air.
Into the fire, not away from it.
Ron DiFrancesco was the last person to get out of the South Tower alive. One of 4 who escaped from above the plane. The writer John Geiger asked him what it was.
In the case of Ron DiFrancesco, he felt that it was an angel. I asked him, what was this? How do you explain it? He said that an angel had come to help him.
Hold on to that answer. He gives a different one at the end of this video.
Geiger gave this thing its name. He took it from a poem.
In 1922, T.S. Eliot wrote, "Who is the third who walks always beside you?"
At the back of the book, he explained where he got it.
The account of one of the Antarctic expeditions. I forget which, but I think one of Shackleton's.
He could not remember which expedition. He named the phenomenon anyway.
And the name is wrong.
Eliot counted a third. Shackleton counted a fourth.
One after the other realized that they'd all had the same experience, that there was a fourth presence that had joined them on that.
For 100 years, the most famous line anybody has written about this has been off by one.
In 2006, in a hospital in Geneva, a 22-year-old woman was lying awake on an operating table. She had epilepsy. Before they could operate, they had to map her brain.
So they passed a small current into it, one region at a time, and asked her what she felt.
And here we stimulated this region, and each time we stimulated, that person also felt somebody present. But she was, of course, not at 8,000 meters altitude, even though this is Switzerland, this is Geneva, 500 meters.
She said, "He is behind me, almost at my body, but I do not feel it."
They asked her to sit up and hug her knees. She said he was sitting too, that he was holding her.
She said she did not like it. Then they gave her a card and asked her to read it out loud. And she said,
He wants to take the card.
"He doesn't want me to read." Now look at what was actually happening. When she lay down, he lay down. When she sat up, he sat up. When she held her knees, he held her. Everything the man behind her did, she had just done herself. He was copying her. Exactly. And she never noticed.
There are perceptions of my body for which my brain makes an error, and if this is under these particular instances, it's perceived as somebody else. If that misperception, my body is correctly perceived here, and I perceive another human body behind me, which is somehow linked to my own bodily movements, the human brain responds in a way to say, this must be somebody else. It cannot be me.
It cannot be me. That is the error. That is the whole thing. 8 years later, Blanke decided to build one.
Good representation. So what we did again, just in the avatar illusion, is to have setups using robotics. In this case, it's a blindfolded subject, and so we have a motor signal in the front and a feedback signal in the back, and there's delays and spatial mismatch that we can induce in a controlled fashion.
You move a lever with one finger. A robot behind you touches your back with exactly that movement.
In perfect time, nothing happens. It just feels like your own hand.
So they added a delay. Half a second.
That is all they changed. Nothing else in the room was different.
5 of the 17 people said, without being asked, that there was somebody else in the room. They had built a ghost out of half a second.
And this is where we should be careful.
A psychologist at Durham has spent years arguing this is not one thing. He went to Geneva, he got on the robot.
I went to Geneva in 2022 and had a go on the presence robot. It didn't work for me, but then I'm also the least hallucination-prone person in the world. Nothing interesting has ever happened to me, really. So I'm not the best test subject.
And he says the stories themselves are lying to us.
The problem with that sort of account, if we're thinking kind of empirically and theoretically, is it involves literal survivor bias, right? We hear about lots of examples of presences for the people who get back down the mountain. We don't hear about the presences that scares you so much you fall off the mountain.
A helpful companion. That is the only kind that comes home to tell you about it.
So turning to the last example very briefly, in sleep paralysis and hypnagogia, you have some of the most consistent examples of presence. If around kind of between a third and 1 in 7 adults have sleep paralysis, about over half of them in published studies tend to report presence experiences, and the vast majority of these are very
Malevolent. Not helpful. Not a companion.
Feeling of a presence is actually not most frequent on the Himalayas or in fiction or even in our research lab. It's 50% of patients with Parkinson's disease who have, if they start hallucinating, which is happening very frequently for advanced forms of Parkinson's disease. The presence hallucination is one of the first hallucinations that these patients will have.
Half of them sitting in an ordinary room at sea level with nothing happening at all.
In 2025, Blanke's own lab pooled 26 experiments and wrote a sentence about their own work that most people would leave out. It lacks independent, multi-site replication.
Nobody has explained the fourth man. They have found one of the roads.
And that road runs straight through you. Your brain holds a model of your own body, where it is, what it just did, what it is about to feel. It checks that model against you constantly, and it never tells you it is doing it.
Move the timing by half a second, and the model stops fitting.
And the brain will not throw it away, so it gives it to somebody else. The man behind you is the part of you that no longer fits.
On a mountain, in a stairwell, in 36 hours of snow. It is made out of you.
Ron DiFrancesco told John Geiger that an angel had come to help him. Years later, on television, he was asked again.
So some say it may be God or an angel, and some say it may just be me, my adrenaline. But
some say it may just be me.
Shackleton never explained it. He wrote his 8 lines, and he closed the chapter. But we know where the fourth man came from now. He came from Shackleton.